Hello, everybody. Welcome to QDA podcast, where we question the answers of things that we may or may not have once questioned or answered or not. I nailed it because I was reading it that time. I am Eon K. Grissom.
I'm Dookie Royale.
And this week we've got a special super guest.
Yes, we do. We want to welcome Sandra Champlain from the book We Don't Die, A Skeptic's Discovery of Life After Death. Welcome, Sandra.
Hello, Dookie. Hello, Eon. It is my pleasure to be here with you.
We're really glad you joined us today.
Me too. Me too. Because I think we're going to have some fun.
Yeah. This episode, we're into the afterlife. We're into, we don't die. Maybe some religious tones here. And, I hear, reading the book that you wrote, We Don't Die, I noticed that you'd been on a journey for quite a while, coming to the conclusion of writing this book. Can you tell us about how you came to...
A little bit of the story in a nutshell is I was somebody who was very fearful of dying back in the 90s. I mean, very fearful, and never told anybody about it, but like I'd go to bed at night I couldn't handle the unknown of, does Sandra go on after the body dies? And so very secretly it started me on this search to find some kind of proof. And naturally, the first thing I started with was religion, because I grew up Catholic, and then I studied tons of major world religions. And although everybody had these great stories of faith in the afterlife, it's like nobody really had the proof to rest my fears. So I went to bed one night going, well, I'm not going to find my answer, so I just might as well stop. And if I can become the best person I can be, then, if there is heaven or hell, at least I'll go to heaven. And so that's kind of how I left things. And then not too much longer after, a friend of mine got me interested in the world of psychic stuff and medium stuff. And before that, I would laugh at people that talked about life after death or Bigfoot or and some of the topics you've had on your show and other people on their show. Because, my dad was an airline pilot, very analytical brain, and, he would tell me, like, that stuff's not real and don't even get involved with it. So, the subtitle of my book is, We Don't Die, A Skeptic's Discovery of Life After Death. So I meet this fantastic friend who's just got these stories of psychic stuff, and then, how you can know somebody who's calling you right before you answer the phone? You have those weird things. Well, that started happening to me more and more. I started knowing people's names before they tell me. My day job is I'm a chef. So many of us that are interested in these different topics have day jobs. And I remember working with a woman who is a chef, and she had told me that her mom was deceased and her stepmom was deceased. And she made this incredible fish recipe. I mean, it was like so delicious. And I said, well, who taught you how to make it? Was it Joan or Marie? And she looked at me and her eyes, big eyes, and her mouth dropped. And she's like, I never told you their names. And like that stuff started happening. And so I took a course on mediumship. This is just the short version.
Right.
Very secretly, I took a course on mediumship, and right out of my own head, I was able to sometimes be extremely accurate with names and information about people and their deceased loved ones, which kind of freaked the heck out of me. But that kind of opened the door that started resting my fears. And so secretly I would go on and on and on, and what else can I find? What else can I find? And I started studying near-death experiences and things like remote viewing and reincarnation. And I ended up with a bunch of stuff kind of in my pocket that really rested my mind that, when Sandra's body dies, Sandra goes on. But I never told anybody because I thought, again, people would think I was a freak. I'd lose friends and family. And so I just kind of kept it hush-hush. And then 5 years ago, it was May of 2010, my dad ends up dying. And out of his death, and I don't know if you've experienced significant loss in your life, and I'm sure some of your listeners/viewers have, and it's like the most devastating thing that will ever happen.
Sure.
I ended up doing some research, like, why does it have to hurt so bad? Like, what the hell is going on in our brains that causes such intense pain and all the other things that go along with grief? And I found some really gems of information about what happens in our brain, how our brain chemistry changes, and like there was an explanation for everything. And so I created a free audio that I put online. I've got the domain name survivegrief.com, still exists, and I posted this 70-minute audio called How to Survive Grief. And at the time, I only had like a couple hundred Facebook friends, and I made like 3 posts on Facebook. Well, in a matter of just a couple of months, over 3,000 people had heard it, and people started writing not only how it helped ease their pain and it helped them in their relationships, but then I started getting reports that people chose not to commit suicide because for the very first time they understood their pain. And so then all of a sudden I feel like I have a moral responsibility. Like if I've got something here that can really help people, like how do I get it out into the world? And basically, I don't want to be known as the grief lady for the rest of my life. And like what has been my hidden passion? We all have to keep following our passion, right? And it's been the life after death stuff. So I figured, if I could title a book We Don't Die and really deliver on all the things that I found that convinced me that we go on after our body disappears, and then sneak in 1 chapter on grief, which is the same as that grief audio. And then the bottom line is, if we don't die, who are we and what the heck is life for, and how to have a powerful life? And so I found a publisher, and he loved the idea. He was pretty stunned that, like, there I was, a 40-something-year-old woman thinking I had the answers about life and death. And after he read a couple of chapters, I got the How Fast Can You Have It written, and wrote it in 2 months. Got fast-forwarded on publishing. It hit #1 on Amazon a couple of times. I've been on some pretty big shows, and I still continue to get those emails, not only the suicide, people pass on doing that, but people have a lot of compassion about somebody who's lost a loved one. People are no longer afraid of dying. I mean, not 24/7, because it's hard to forget that we're human and something bigger than this, but it's empowering a lot of people to live great lives, and I'm having a ton of fun sharing it. And like you guys, I started my own podcast, which is WeDon'tDieRadio.com, and I continue to learn and hear stories about other people, why they believe in life after death, and it is like a fun area to be in and to help people.
Your podcast is really good. I've listened to probably half of the episodes. I mean, you're on episode, what, 70 or something right now? 65?
Yeah, 65.
Yeah.
Thanks for that.
Yeah, no problem. I really like them.
Yours.
Well, it's a subject that I like.
Yeah, it's cool, because truly, I really believe if we don't have a fear of dying, we won't have a fear of living. Like, if you really know you can't get hurt, I mean, I'm not talking about jumping into a highway or in front of a bus or anything, but I mean, there's times where you really want to say something to somebody. Maybe it's an I love you to a significant other, or maybe it's like quitting a job and starting your own business or whatever, but so often fear stops us, and there's no right way or wrong way to do life. And if you know that everything is an education for your soul, everything, that you might take another risk, and the only way to get a new result and success is to take an action you haven't taken before. So that's what I like to promote and try to do myself.
You think most people are more afraid of the act of dying or the afterlife?
I think it's the act of dying. Like, I know that no matter what I believe, I don't want to go through pain.
Right.
I saw my dad go through pain, and there's got no interest in that. And then also the unknown, And you know what? I've heard a lot of people say that we have to be responsible for our actions. A lot of these people that have had near-death experiences, there's a life review, and although there's nobody there saying heaven for you and hell for you, we relive our lives from the perspective of the people that we're in with it. So if I got into a conversation and hurt a friend of mine with my words, I actually get to experience it from his point of view and feel that pain. And for me, I don't really want to relive that. So it's having me think now very carefully how I choose my words and my actions, so they're all for the good.
Oh yeah, it's like maybe all the things you might have done in elementary, middle school, and high school to other kids.
Oh yeah, and some of that is so far back I don't even remember.
That's right.
I'll have to relive it, but oh well. Oh well.
So back to the grief part. I mean, I read that chapter in your book, and there was a lot of stuff in there I didn't know, like the brain chemistry that changes when you start going through the grief, and it made a lot of sense to me.
Yeah.
Because obviously you can't remember things like. You feel really down, you get depressed. There was like a 5-step process of how to recognize certain things.
Yeah, and there's some pretty similar things that happen to people. And the thing is if you've never had a loss before, and it's not just grieving the death of somebody. Some people have a really hard breakup with a husband or wife or girlfriend, boyfriend. Some people lose a job. Some people get diagnosed with an illness. It's like anytime there's a significant loss in our brain tries to readjust itself to the new surroundings. And while that's happening, like our memory suffers, we don't have like the feel-good neurotransmitters like we always hear about, serotonin and endorphins and things like that. I mean, they go bye-bye, I mean, for the most part. And what we're left with is just sleepless nights or too much sleep or depression and crying and sadness. And, you feel like you're going crazy. Your mind never stops talking to you. Lots of feelings of guilt. Even people that get out of the service, I've heard lots of stories, because now we've got a lot of soldiers that have, I think it's 22 a day that are committing suicide.
Right.
Just here in the United States. And it's like I started comparing, I mean, that's grief. I mean, you've got a job and you're respected, and all of a sudden you're out in the real world and you may not have a job, you might not, whatever that may be. And I think somehow that's all tied into grief. So if I can help people get their brain chemistry back.
It's also like trauma too, I guess, right?
Yeah, mega. Oh yeah, definitely. So
yeah,
in humans.
Kind of building on that, the subject in your book is mental games that people play on with themselves with this thing that is called the voice, as you call it.
Yeah.
Can you expand on the voice and what and why that happens?
Yeah, I've always thought it was a curse of being human, and is that we all have this voice inside of our head that never shuts up. I wake up in the morning, I look in the mirror, and it's like, oh, I'm old, I'm single, I'm too big, I'll never get married, like whatever that is. I feel like there's a ton of stuff that I haven't accomplished yet. Like, I put things on to-do lists, and sometimes they don't happen, so I'm always beating up on myself for the undone things. I'm always, I'm looking at life, not ever rejoicing about all the good things that I've done, but like what's undone or what's wrong with me. And so we all have that inner critic inside. Some people call it the committee. I've heard it called Negative Nancy. It's pretty funny. But we all have it. And it's that same voice that has us hit the snooze button every morning, as opposed to when we were little kids, we would jump out of bed and, or even remember being a kid, like you didn't even want to go to bed. And now it's like, yeah, how soon can I go to bed? When we get older. So the thing is that we all have this voice, and I think it's based on, things we learned in our past. So if like you were a little kid and some teacher says, Eon, you're not smart. Well, little kids' brains up to the age of 7 years old, whatever we're told, like that's reality. So you could end up being, a person in your 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, and you still, you're not conscious about it, but you don't feel smart. And that little voice inside your head will do everything possible to like remind you of that. And so I think everybody kind of gets what the voice is and having it, but it's not anything that is empowering us, and 99% of the stuff it says is not the truth. I think it's great as a survival mechanism. So if like you're crossing the road and you look both ways, not to jump in front of traffic. So for like survival, that's great. But if you want to start a business or you want to do something new and it's yelling, don't do it, you're going to fail. Like there's no reality in that. So what I try to do is help people identify that, yeah, we have that voice, and we can actually quiet the mind and get really into the present moment and realize, don't listen to that voice. Put it in the back seat. Have you drive the car and just put that in the back seat. But it's a constant thing, and even the most wise Buddhist masters, they still have no expertise for that. So
just what I was about to say was, it comes back to Buddhism and kind of humming to get the voice out of your head.
Yeah.
Calming the mind.
I just had a thought pop into my head. I thought, well, it helps you survive, but it keeps you, It helps you for surviving, but it keeps you from thriving.
Yeah, it does. Oh, yeah. I can't tell you how many people I've talked to that have had operations and stuff. And even I talked to a doctor that had, I don't know how many people he had done heart operations on, and he said thousands. But he said right before, you know, they knocked the people out. I mean, people just have these regrets and these fears and what they should have done and shouldn't have done. And you know, if I can help people so that you live life, and of course we make mistakes because that's just what we do, but could you imagine not being afraid of dying and that last moment you close your eyes, like you're not worried about the future, that you can look back in the past and go like, oh my God, I really went for it. You know, I got my money's worth out of that life. You know, and sure, there's going to be things undone and unsaid, but for the most part, to not have any fear and know that when you close your eyes, you're going to open them again and you're going to be surrounded by your loved ones, your pets. You're going to be able to review this past time around and choose to come back someday or not.
Yeah, I can't remember a past life story where I read that they were wheeling their gurney into the surgery room before they died, and streamers were falling from the ceiling, and they were tooting on a kazoo or having a party or anything. They're always got up heartbeat. You know, they're all nervous. Some of them are crying. As a matter of fact, I work at hospitals every day, and there's a lot of times where I'm stuck in. I'm in IT with these hospitals, but sometimes I'm stuck. You know, having to see people get wheeled around the hospital. And one day I was in a surgery room and they wheeled a lady in, and she was going hysterical, praying to God. You know, don't take me now. She was going to have open heart surgery, and she was super nervous about it. So I completely understand where you're going with that.
Oh, yeah. And now, I mean, I still have that fear about dying a bit, you know, and then it takes myself actually reminding myself, you know, like, well, wait a minute, you know, this is real. And I think part of me having my own podcast is the same thing. I hear so many awesome stories that I think we need things in our life to remind us of who we are and get us thinking outside of the box, because it's very easy for us to feel like, first of all, we're spinning around on planet Earth. Like, you know how many people don't think there could be possibly any life anywhere else in the universe, right?
Sure.
So that's pretty close-minded. And even to look at everything we have around us and think, well, there's no way there could be life after death. There's no way these things can be possible, you know. And then if people take a minute to think back to like the beginning of our planet, it used to be just rocks and trees and water and, you know, the basic elements. And now out of it we have electricity, iPhones, everything, you know, music and airplanes, and like we are actually living in such a miraculous place. 100, 200 years ago, you would ever tell somebody that we're going to have this conversation right now, you know, and we're not even connected, you know, and like I can see you and I can hear you. You know, that's like, why?
Yeah, it would have been like a 2-year journey for me to get to your house and talk to you.
Yeah, exactly. The horse and buggy and stuff. So
that's right. Even that.
And what's crazy is people act like going 10 over the speed limit is too slow.
Yes, they do.
They've lost touch with what's going on.
Yeah, we've lost touch with a lot. I mean, I was in a restaurant and I saw 4 guys around the table, and I thought they were all praying because they were looking down. And I think I was in Utah, so I'm like, well, that makes sense. You know, there's a lot of religious people there. But when I really looked, like they were all on their iPhones or their BlackBerries, they're all texting. It's like we get so caught up in technology that I think we miss things that are happening right in front of us. And I also think, like, all the psychic stuff that happens, any people that get in touch with the deceased loved ones doing mediumship, people that have that sixth sense, I think we all do. But those psychic hits that we get, I don't know if you guys are familiar with remote viewing or ESP techniques.
Sure.
All of that stuff takes place in the present moment when we are present. We're not in our busy mind trying to text somebody, you know what I mean? Download some songs on iTunes.
So I noticed that there's a lot of other phenomena that happened around you before you started writing the book, like EVPs, electronic voice phenomenon recording. You have a really interesting EVP recording story.
I do.
I wonder if you could expand on that.
Yeah. After I did my weekend learning to be a medium, which was mind-blowing, which maybe we can get into later or not. Oh, and just for your listeners and viewers, if you go to where my podcast is, WeDon'tDieRadio.com, I've got something called the Insiders Club. But if you fill out your name and your email address, you can actually read the first many chapters of my book and all the ones that have my journey of why I believe in life after death. Because obviously in just our hour, I'm not going to be able to get to it all.
Right.
But anyway, so I want to invite people to have that. WeDon'tDieRadio.com. Anyways, so back to your question. When I left that medium retreat, I had this feeling that, there is so much pain on the planet. If I could help people and really share what I know, that people that are suffering from grief, like I would help them. But the thing is the voice in my mind was like, well, Sandra, you were wrong so many times during the medium reading. And I was right so many times. So I had this super fear that if I worked with somebody and I was wrong, that people would think I'm a fraud. And I'm terrified of that. So I kind of kept digging for something tangible that I could do, or something like I could pass on to people so they didn't have to believe what came out of my mind. And so I happened to be in a Barnes & Noble once, and I saw a book called An Idiot's Guide to Communicating with Spirits. All kinds of books out there.
Yes.
And long story short, it led me to a spiritualist church in Massachusetts where the minister, Rita Berkowitz is her name, is a medium, and would draw portraits of people that she saw standing around your deceased loved ones. And, and that blew my mind. And I had gotten one of those portraits done, and he drew a picture of my dad, and it was just fantastic stuff. Anyways, she had said, next week I'm going to have a guest minister, and I think you'd enjoy it. And so I went, and it was a husband and wife team. The wife was the minister, which in the spiritualist faith, very much like Christianity, but at the end of the service, the minister comes out and does a medium reading, goes through the congregation and says who's around. And, it's really neat because it's not a New Age church, a lot of senior citizens there, and it's very, very peaceful, very great. Well, this woman gets up and she does her medium reading, and then she says, I want to introduce you to my husband. And she says, my husband does this thing called EVP, electronic voice phenomena. So the husband gets up and he says, I never believed in life after death. He says, I'm of scientific nature, I'm an engineer, and he says, if I can't prove something, I don't believe in it. So he says, so I did all the study on electronic voice phenomena, which is using some kind of a recorder, cassette recorder, digital tape recorder, to record sounds of like nothing, record sounds of raindrops or a fan blowing, and then when you play it back, the people in the hereafter are able to rearrange the sounds, and so when you play it back, there's actually voices there. Right. So, of course, I'm sitting in the audience like, no freaking way, come on, like that's crazy. But the man seemed serious. He was an older fella, and so he said both he and his wife had children die in previous marriages. So he said, I got a book called, There Is No Death and There Are No Dead by Tom and Lisa Butler. And he said, and I got my tape recorder, and you have to say a prayer first, kind of that it's a safe space, and bring in some energy and talk to your loved ones if they can try to do this. And he says, we left this microphone sitting on the pillow in our bedroom and left a fan blowing, and we left for the house for about 20 minutes. So he says, this is what was on it when we came back into the house. And so it gives me goosebumps just to even say it, but it said, it sounded like giggling, and then it said, Daddy, don't be scared, we're still here with you. And I have to tell you, that freaked me out, but it also excited me. Like, that's what I'm looking for, is something that I can do that can, like, if I can do that, then people will believe it. So there's all kinds of, it took a few months before I actually had the guts to take a course, but I met up with this Tom and Lisa Butler and spent a weekend with them at a place called the Omega Center in upstate New York. And we would sit around, like 5 or 6 of us in, it seemed like we were almost doing a seance or something. We'd hold hands and we'd try to bring in the energy, and then we'd ask our loved ones if they could speak really loudly and put voices onto our tape recorders. And we each had just a small tape recorder, a little digital tape recorder. And it was so cool because this Tom and Lisa Butler had been mediums themselves, and so they would hear they would download the recordings into their computer, and then they would loop it around over and over and over, and we'd be listening in for these words. And the problem with EVPs is like 99% of them are just whispers within the background sound. It's like, it's very hard, and I guess it must be if you're in the hereafter, to try to rearrange sound molecules to sound like voices. But every so often there'd be something good. And out of my recorder, I couldn't hear this, but they kept saying, Sandra, is your mother's name Marion? Do you have a grandfather named John? You know, and just, they give me names of people that were in my life, and they heard it on my recorder. So now I'm still thinking this is cool, but it's not cool enough because I can't hear it yet. And so part of our homework that last night of the course was to go back into our cabins and try to record one on our own. So imagine being in a cabin out in kind of the middle of nowhere. It was a safe place. I had a roommate, and she was out to dinner for the evening, and I had my tape recorder, and it was pouring rain outside. And the rain was coming down, and I thought that might be a good background sound to record. And I said a prayer, you know, it's to be a safe space, and closed my eyes, and I imagined my aunt and my uncle and my grandparents coming in to the foot of my bed. And of course, honest to God, I think this is all, I'm making it up and I'm losing my mind. But you know, I'm always the good student, so I'll always do the homework. And I held out my recorder and I said, if you guys are here and this is real, I said, I need you to talk very loudly. Because I said, there's a lot of people in pain, and we could really help them if they were to believe that, however I said it, we don't die or something like that. So I said, I'm going to let the recorder just record a minute, and then I'll say goodnight. So I just let this thing record the sound of the raindrops for a minute, and then I said, okay, good night. So I didn't have a computer in front of me. All I had was a set of headphones that I plugged into my recorder. And when I listened to it the first time, it's like I got filled with goosebumps, almost like you know something's on there, because all that should have been on there is the sound of raindrops and the sound of my voice. But when you get to, I think it's second number 46 on the digital display, a man's voice comes on, and it says, good night, Sandra. And then there's two whispers of ladies' voices that say, good night, and then there's a male's voice that says, good night. And it is loud, and I would say pretty clear, and sounds almost, I mean, I can tell that it's a man's voice and women's voices, but it sounds almost like digital. Sure. And yeah, so, also, you go to my website, thatwedon'tdieradio.com, and you look under products. Somebody has made a documentary about me, which is pretty darn cool. Yeah. But on the preview to the documentary is actually that Good Night, Sandra, so you can see me filming and actually hear that recording. But, you know, I got to be honest with you guys, it scared the heck out of me, because as nice as this whole life after death thing is, it's like, are people constantly around me? Do I have any privacy? You know, I mean, it freaked me out. And it wasn't until I went back into the classroom the next day with Tom and Lisa Butler and could play my recording, and people that were there who had lost children, had lost their spouses, had lost somebody very significant, when I saw how much it eased their pain and gave them hope, it's like I knew I was on the right track. So very secretly, the couple years that followed that, I did so many recordings, I just gave it away, and I'd work with all kinds of people very secretly and do a bunch of recordings. And I would say over 90% of the time, people could hear them. I mean, I could start hearing more detailed things than they could, but they could definitely hear, you know, I love you, Kevin, you know, things like that. And it just, when you hear that, it's like your whole world changes.
Yeah, I went on a ghost hunt here in Marietta, Georgia, with Atlanta Ghost Hunters. They were like a radio.
Oh, neat, yeah.
People. And I just went, me and my wife went, and they had a 4-hour session with them. We went to a lawyer's office that's had this, you know, it was a small house, like a 2-bedroom house, like a small 70s type house. Yeah. And we did 4 hours. They gave me a DVD, but while we were about to leave, you know, 30 minutes or so, we analyzed it. They were able to pick out 25 EVPs in like the 30 or 45 minutes that they were just scanning over the CD. So it was quite amazing. That place was super active. We heard a voice come out of nowhere.
Oh my!
We were all in like a seance circle.
Yeah, I'd say the natural reaction is to be freaked out.
Oh yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Because it's just so unexpected and so unlike something that you thought was possible.
Yeah.
But then it happens and it shocks your senses. My initial, whenever I've had something like that happen, my initial thought is doubt. Like I was wrong. I misperceived it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't know how comfortable I'd be if, like, I've been able to hear things, and that's all fine, and I've been able to pick up things with my mind's eye. But if all of a sudden in front of me I saw this translucent person walk by, I think that would freak me out. I'm not ready for that. But I do know people that's happened to.
Yeah, it makes you wonder what ghosts really are, because you can contact your loved ones, when you ask. But some ghosts like scratch people and do all these kind of weird things, like poltergeists and demons, or what people call demons anyway.
Yeah, I don't get. I mean, it all depends on what you're looking for. In my world, I'm always looking for the good. So I haven't dealt with too much negative stuff. I know it's good to be a positive person because you attract positive, and I know people that are negative all the time, like, they feel like they have a ghost on your shoulder. You may just have, something negative hanging on to you. But it's, I picture ghosts kind of like I picture the clouds, and we're all made up of energy. Like, everything around us is energy. Even the sound waves that are connecting us right now is energy. The microphone in front of you, computer, the cell phone you might have, it's all just vibrating energy. And so energy, more than one form of energy can live in the same space as another kind of energy. Because around us, you've got it, I've got it, the listeners have it, is maybe the wireless internet or radio waves or television signals or something like that. And it's a whole invisible world that is very, very real. So I think just like a glass of water can evaporate and change form, it can change to steam or whatever, or back to raindrops. I think there is a mastery that comes if you want it when you're in the hereafter or heaven, that you might be able to manipulate energy and, scratch somebody on the back or have a butterfly show up or, whatever those things may be. Like, I think that's possible. I don't know how it's done, but I do think it's possible.
Yeah, and I think that there's a lot of different shades of afterlife, because you mentioned in your book that you had studied a lot of past lives and regression and things like that. Edith Fiore's book and Brian Weiss, which I have sitting right next to me, as a matter of fact. I read those things as well.
Next to me, here's a shameless plug for my book. For anybody watching this on YouTube, there's a picture of my book, We Don't Die.
Yes.
Buy it on Amazon.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, or wherever you buy books. Yes.
Yeah, I got mine on Amazon.
Thank you. Anyway, back to you.
Hey, Sandra, is there an audiobook version of that?
There is not yet. There is just the DVD documentary, or the documentary.
All right.
Yeah, there is a lot of different shades of afterlife. People that haven't gone to the light yet, these types of things.
It's 50 Shades of Afterlife.
Attachment.
Yeah. You need to write that book. That's great. That is good.
People, they're just kind of the spirit attachments. I think Edith Fiore wrote about spirit attachments and things like that. My dad was really into that. My dad is a past life regressionist, and he did that for about 15 years. He claimed to be able to heal people through other people, doing hypnotism and stuff like that.
Yeah. Fascinating.
It is. I mean, it's really kind of wild, crazy.
Yeah.
He did hypnotism on my small little brother to help him regain memory, and he's never had an issue since.
That's great.
He healed like a whole bunch of like eating disorders on himself. That stories go on and on and on. But with you, Sandra, what was your experience with the past lives and the hypnotism?
Well, past lives and hypnotism. Well, this is.
I know in your book you said you hypnotized a couple people, but I need you to kind of expand on that.
As the skeptic, it's like I want to go either prove something's real or not, and I've always been on a diet up and down with my weight, and somebody had told me about going to a hypnotist, and I went to this guy, and he was like a complete scam, right? And I thought, even though he was a scam, I really thought there was something to it. So I ended up taking another weekend course out in California on hypnosis, and it's like, oh my God, it's real. It's not what a lot of people think it is. Nobody has complete control over you. I mean, you have to be a partner in it all. But something I'm flashing back to is when I was in high school, we used to have these sleepovers. I'd have the girls come over, and my friend Tina, her father, I can't even believe I'm remembering the story, but her father was a psychiatrist, and she was saying, my father puts people in trances. And so I'm like, what is that? And he rubbed the people's temples, and then they had to count backwards. And now, so many years forward, like this was hypnosis that was going on. But at one of these sleepovers, I was the one, because I had the voice, I was nice voice for knocking people out. But I ended up doing this to this girl, Andrea. Well, all of a sudden, Andrea started talking that she's like, who are you? And now this goes from being my 14-year-old friend to talking that she's in Salem, Massachusetts, and her mother and her sister were killed for being witches. And it was wild because she was saying these things in such complete description that it actually freaked the heck out of me, and I realized that I've got no business playing around with this because Andrea was not kidding. And I've seen enough movies that I said, okay, I'm going to count to 3 and snap my fingers, and you'll have no memory of this. And sure enough, that happened. Well, a couple other times I went back in to mess with Andrea, but each time there was some other past experience that was so, so, so real. So I knew that the whole world of hypnosis, even present day when I took the course on it, that it's very real. I mean, it's stuff that happens in our mind. If we can do something in our mind first, we can do it in reality. But what was the other part of the question? The past life experiences?
Yeah. Well, I guess we can.
We can go anywhere. I got tied up because I got.
Do you have like a favorite past life story?
Have you personally had any experiences of I don't know, visions, past life or afterlife experiences, anything outside of quote unquote rational perception?
I have, like, in the hypnotic state. I did take a course with Brian Weiss, and he regressed the audience kind of thing, and I felt myself as a African American man in the bottom of a swimming pool, like I'd been killed, right? And the feeling was that I was standing up for something that I believed in and opened my voice to something. And the clothes that I had on would have been in the 40s or 50s. So it was very strange, and it scared me, and it jolted my eyes open.
Huh.
And then I have myself had some one-on-ones with some pretty famous people that have told me both the same story about myself, that I have had so many past lives that I'm trying to make a difference for people and do good things. And I've not been hung on a cross, but I've been killed, and like there's been a whole series of me trying to do something good only to get hurt by it or killed by it. And so, like, why they were bringing this into present day is they're like, you've got a big mission, and you're so scared that people are going to think you're crazy, but, like, gone are the days that you're going to be,
Right, like you're afraid they're going to come after you, like in the days of the witch
and stuff. Yeah.
Maybe that's where your fear of death kind of spawns from.
Yeah, it could. It very, very well could. And I used to work in a nursing home as a kid, and I see a lot of my favorite old people not be there when I went to watch the next day. So I don't know. But I do know from so many people and so many people that I've talked to, not just the near-death experiences. I don't know if you're familiar with Dr. Ken Ring, who somebody named Raymond Moody did just a ton of research on near-death experiences about when we do flatline, how people can see outside of their bodies and things like that, and real detailed description. But this guy, Ken Ring, studied people that were blind, and they were always blind. So, like, they could never see. And in those moments that they flatlined, they could actually tell what the doctor was doing, what the spouse was wearing, like in so much detail, which also brings a great deal of faith and happiness that whatever your ailments are in this life right now, whether you're wearing glasses, whether you have a disorder of some sort, or you only have one leg, whatever that is, you're restored to wholeness, and when we cross over, and I'm like, that's awesome. The lady that drew the picture of my dad, this Rita Berkowitz, not only did she give me a medium reading and tell me detailed things about my dad and how he got diagnosed with cancer and when it all happened, and so specific, but she brought her notebook out and she started drawing a picture, and she drew a picture of my dad looking like he was in his late 20s while he was in the Air Force with a crew cut, and she's like, because last I saw my dad was he was 74 with tubes in him and very frail and white hair and stuff and suffering. And she's like, oh, honey, we can be any age we want to be, and that was your dad's best age. So it's like, oh, goody, really good.
What does the typical NDE look like, according to like Raymond Moody and those?
The typical NDE, and from the people I've talked to, there are differences, because I think just like there's no two snowflakes the same, no two human beings the same, everybody's got their own different version. But basically, when the body shuts down and we take our last breath, one good thing happens is that little negative voice stops talking, which is like, I can't wait, right? That's a great thing. But people feel drawn to a light. There are people that have had near-death experiences that were bad people that I've talked to. There was a doctor that it was all about money with him. It wasn't about the patient. He was very honest about that. And his first thing he saw was darkness and just a lot of pain and thunder and negative. And
I remember that one. It was
Rajiv Parti.
Parti, yeah.
Yeah, and there was also a professor, same thing. He was caught up in the alcohol and the women and this and that, and and lots of darkness came first. But when instinctively people prayed, and so this little pinprick of light would open up, and the more faith that they had, like this light would just really open up, and as bright as the light is, it wasn't too bright that you couldn't see it, but people feel drawn to the light. So often people are like, go to the light. And you just talked about some of these earthbound spirits. There are people that are too afraid to go into the light. I hear stories of people that just bought this beautiful new house or just had a baby, and like they just can't leave, and they don't trust that when they go through the light they can come back. So
sure,
they stay on this side of it, and it's not a healthy place. And I think these are the people that we talk about as far as ghosts. But going through the light, people have this life review. They see their life as like it just the whole thing gets flashed by in just seconds. That you're living your life from the people's perspective of that you dealt with. I like hearing the negative stuff. Like you have to deal with that first. And then you yourself see how your soul has grown or not. But then you see the good that you've done. And people say you see the ripple effect. So I can just imagine a great teacher, how she can see the difference she made in her students and then what they went on to do. So I love that. People are embraced by their deceased loved ones, and apparently we all have angel guides, and some of them are people that have lived this earth and some people have not. But they're there to greet us. There is a feeling that the colors we see are colors we don't have here on Earth. I mean, we see the ones we have here on Earth, but there are so many more. There's so many sounds that we don't have. I mean, it really is this place of just complete beauty, and like you think it, and it happens. So and then after that, I don't have too many details because a lot of people have come back, right? Because
sucked back in their body, yeah.
Near-death experiences. What I do know, though, is that people that have had these near-death experiences have a tremendous memory of the event that happened like it happened just 2 seconds ago.
Right, and 50 years later they can remember it.
They remember it just like it just happened. And they all have this urge to help people in this lifetime. And so they say that when we die, there's hereafter. I like calling it the hereafter because I totally believe that heaven, if you want to call it that, is vibrating same place we are. I mean, it's like it's all happening right around us. We just can't see it, like we can't see the wireless internet, but our loved ones are there. But there's learning to be done there. There's more growth to be done, and then many people say that our souls reincarnate around each other. So we're all going to wait till we all meet up again, and then we're going to debrief after this lifetime and choose whether we want to go into the next one or not.
Soul groups. Yeah.
Soul groups. Yeah.
And I always look around me to see who the soul group I'm with, and who I have that in my mind almost always. It's kind of strange.
Well, you know what? Even when bad things happen, sorry to interrupt you, Ian, but even when bad things happen, it's like, is it a bad thing, or is it somehow a growth for me in my soul right now? But,
so we must have already known each other in past existences and decided to make this happen this way somehow.
Yeah. I think it's fun. I mean, the more people that join hands, this will become more of a conversation than the flip side, which is, it's not possible. You know, it's like, why not?
There's a couple things I say to that. I went to Europe once when I was a kid, and I was in Czech Republic.
Yeah.
In a city out of nowhere, like out in the middle of nowhere. We were on a train, and we stopped at this small city in Czech Republic, and a kid from my high school walked right by me. And I was like, there's no possible way that could have happened. But that could be the little connection between we're having right now. Maybe we just, we didn't know each other, but maybe we were in the same restaurant together in Prague at one point in our past lives.
Yeah, it's fun. It's all, I think, can be very, very fun. And as long as people can find, you guys have your own speciality, and I've got mine, and, it's fun to share. I come on your show, you guys come on mine, and I can introduce you to all my listeners, and then if there's topics that you have that I don't have, it's like, it's nice for human beings to be able to not just work your day job, but like get in touch with what you're passionate about and find that, and then really start digging into it, because it's fun. That's meant to be fun.
I dabbled in a little spirit channeling one time, and I was really having a tough time. I was trying to make sense out of stuff, like you said you were, and I was wondering, what's going on? What is reality? Is this real? Why am I this this skeleton wrapped in pink flesh? How does that make sense? Why? And I asked the spirits or whatever. I projected this question out. I said, well, why am I a human being? And oftentimes when I would ask questions, I wouldn't get answers. I would get deeper questions that would kind of answer things. And what it said, the answer that came back to me was, well, are you a human being, or are you temporarily being human?
Oh, my. Right.
I also asked them one time, well, what is the correct political affiliation? Is it left-wing or right-wing? And its answer was, well, a one-winged bird cannot take flight.
Interesting. Yeah, everything needs balance, right? And that's even, why does there have to be so much pain in the world? And I mean, I saw my dad die of cancer. I never want to, I feel so sorry for people that have to suffer. But where there is pain, you can also feel joy. I think this, this is a really cheesy, no pun intended, well, maybe pun intended, comparison. But I ask people if you had like a favorite food, and somebody says pizza, right? So like pizza is so special, and God, I love pizza. Well, if you only got pizza for the rest of your life, pizza would be boring. You need to have different things. We need to have different experiences, and ultimately, it's all so our souls can grow, can learn, can experience new emotion. And some of it is very difficult. I so wish I had the answers. One thing I can tell people, though, is out of your deepest, darkest hours, if you can make it through, at some point, it may actually become a gift that you're able to help someone else through. Like, I never in a million years thought the most painful thing happening to me is the death of my dad, and how that's made now a difference for just tens of thousands of people. Having faith, having belief. And again, like I said at the very beginning, if we don't fear death, we're less likely to fear life. There are people that are stopped when their loved one dies, and they don't live their whole life. There's a lady I met that it took her 30 years before she was able to move on and have a life, because she was so locked in when her spouse died. So.
Now, my favorite episode of your podcast, We Don't Die Radio, is Jeffrey Olson.
Yeah.
Who had an epically long story to tell.
Epic.
And I was like glued. I just sat in my driveway and listened to that one.
That was sad. At
first. It was pretty sad.
Yeah,
but it's typical of some other NDEs that I'd heard.
He lost a child.
He lost a leg. Is that what you said?
No, his wife and his child, and a leg. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. And there was another one, Bruce Van Netta. He was on a other podcast that I listened to, but he was crushed by a truck, and he had this epically long, like 2-hour experience where he was going in and out of the NDE and seeing angels, or what, quote unquote, what he thought was angels. And, that was a really nice one. I'll put those links in the description of this account. But
they're fascinating. Even me talking to, I've talked to a hospice doctor and a hospice nurse, and people before they pass away in hospice, and some people are drugged up. Truly they are, because they're in a lot of pain, but others are not. And there's many people that they know what time it is, they know what date it is, they know who's around them that's alive, and they're totally conscious, but they're also talking to the people that have come to bring them through. And they start talking to their loved ones like they're just there. I mean, there's some really awesome stories. And it's like, oh my gosh. Yeah, Dr. Penny Sartori is one that I interviewed, a hospice nurse, and she's, I mean, they're just incredible. Incredible.
My mother's great grandma was very spiritual, and she was in a coma, and there was a bunch of family around her, and she opened her eyes, and she was looking up into the ceiling, but you could tell she was looking far past the ceiling.
Right.
She had this extremely optimistic look on her face.
Yeah.
And she looked around at everybody and said, "I'm finally going home. It's so beautiful."
Yeah.
And then she closed her eyes and was passed away.
Yeah. So often there's this burst of energy and a huge smile. My day job is I'm a chef. I cook for race car teams. And one of the people that comes to eat under my tent, his wife, her mom has just recently died, and just before she died, she opened her eyes and said, "Hello, hello, hello!" And then out she went. Yeah, it's just cool. I think Steve Jobs has a similar story that just moments before he passed away too, there he was looking into heaven.
Right.
Huh.
Cool. Yeah. And it's
heard
hard
that
to
story.
deal with because our bodies are going to miss our loved ones. I interviewed a lady who was a medium yesterday. I haven't aired the interview yet, but she's been 20 years a medium and a psychic, and she's super famous and all this stuff. But she said when her own mom died, she said it took over 3 years just to get over it, because there is a chemical thing that happens in our body, and love is an addictive thing, and I mean it happens on such a level, in our chemistry, and if we break those bonds, I mean, we're going to go through a withdrawal. So have a lot of compassion if you're somebody who's lost a loved one.
So, Eon, you said you had an NDE. We can quickly
Yeah.
on your NDE.
Yeah, let me give you the short version. Make a short story long, or flip that. Okay, so long story short. So I was at there's this big giant music festival once a year called the Bonnaroo Festival, and this was the first one in, I believe, 2002. So that would have made me 23 years old. And we were getting intoxicated. And so they had this giant medical grade nitrous oxide tank, right? Like that a dentist gives you. And they were filling up these big old balloons of it, and they handed me one. And I started inhaling it and then blowing it back into the balloon and then re-inhaling it and blowing it back into the balloon until I just faded out, right?
Right.
So what happened, what my experience was that I just started zooming out into outer space. And I don't know, I could almost feel like every piece of Eon falling away, like my earthly existence as I knew it was just kind of chipping away piece by piece. And as the pieces fell off, I got going faster and faster and faster and faster to what I would say was the speed of light. I had broken down into my true essence, which is essentially light. And it was overwhelming, the feeling of this speed. And when I almost couldn't take it anymore, I hit this boundary of epidermal skin, and it was about 10 feet thick. Mm-hmm. And I punctured through this flesh boundary. And when I popped out on the other side, I was on this vast plain, like a planet. It looks just like the paintings that Salvador Dali does. These landscapes where there's this tan, kind of almost sandy-looking ground with this blue sky.
Right.
And my first reaction was, wow, this is actually real. It's exactly the same as when you have a really realistic dream and you're so caught up in it and it's real. And the only way you know it's not real is when you wake up. And by comparison, you can see that, oh, wait, that was a dream.
Right.
So that's what happened. I essentially woke up from what I consider this right now to be a dream. And I was sitting there, and things were actually real. They weren't made of atoms. They were solid. They were truly solid. Like this desk is not solid. It's made of tiny little vibrating atoms, and it creates the illusion of being a desk.
Yeah.
But this was true solid ground, and the blue sky was actually the bluest, it was a tangible blue. It was a conscious, like a personality blue. And I was like, hey, blue, and it was almost like, hey, how you doing? But then I was connected to it. And all around me was this like ever-present, like, like a tuning fork where you're like, pung. It was like that, like this vibration that was, I could say it was like angels singing, right? And I had this like overwhelming sensation of like orgasm. It was like almost overwhelming. It was just like oh, and there was a light above me, and it was conscious, and it loved me, and it accepted me, and I had no doubts. I had no fears. I felt more like myself than I've ever felt before. I could see in all directions at one time, and I wouldn't say there was time at this in this experience. It was just like the present,
Right.
But I do remember looking up. I remember thinking to like look down at my hands, and I had hands and I had arms and fingers, but I wasn't wrapped in skin. I was made of like compressed light, like energy or something. I don't know, whatever. And like I said, I don't have any answers for this story. I can just tell the story. And the feeling of gravity was not there. Instead, the feeling was uplifting, like everything was going up. And it was just extremely amazing. I didn't have any thoughts or perceptions of this earthly reality. I wasn't missing anybody.
Mm-hmm.
But I just felt like really content and accepted, and it's just the way everybody wants to feel. And I realized that that's what you're chasing when you're doing drugs or when you're indulging in any thing. Everybody deep down has this knowledge of this thing and this place, and we're trying to attain it the best we can. But then all of a sudden that wave of fear, doubt, darkness just kind of swept over me, and I felt as if I had trespassed into this reality. Like I wasn't supposed to be there. I kind of had broken the rules, I had kind of like, as a computer guy, I'm an IT guy, I had hacked the system, you know what I mean? But in the same sense, I was allowed to come in because I was supposed to come and perceive this for some reason. Mm-hmm. And right when that dark feeling came over me, from my left and my right, of course I could see in all directions, but that's the best way I can explain it right now. These two like really big, powerful, shadowy beings came at me like off the horizon, and they were just super fast and super powerful. And like I remember trying to like turn and get a look at one of them, and before I could even like start to turn, they just grabbed me and just threw me back, and I just immediately like woke up on planet Earth again. And all I see, of course, are my friends standing all around me, like concerned, because I'm sure I was like laying on the ground, like gyrating or passed out or whatever. But I start freaking out because from my perception, I was kind of like fresh to this world. I had no memory of it, and humans, the look of humans really freaked me out because all I saw was these like weird. I could see like the bones underneath, but I saw this like weird skin wrapped around it, and the ears. I remember the flappy looking ears and the noses and the beady little eyes. Oh, it was freaking me out. And I got this immediate feeling like these beings were like some kind of like a half-breed, like they were an abomination of some sort, like the island of Dr. Moreau, you know how he was mixing humans with animals, and it was just like not right. And that was my first thought. And then I guess I started getting oxygen in my physical, recreational vehicle that I'm currently inhabiting. And then I realized, oh, these are my friends, and I was at this concert, and I got myself so messed up, and I must have, I don't know, died or I don't know if I died, because obviously it wasn't like documented.
Right.
Obviously, people that are skeptics say, dude, you were on drugs.
Just a psychedelic experience.
It's just some drug experience, man. But I don't know. Really feel like I had escaped this reality, and there was no drugs in the place where I went. And I really came back, with the fundamental feeling that, if I had any fear of death before, I certainly don't now, because I realize that this is like this is my perception, of course, that this is like a dream.
Yeah.
Einstein explained this as an illusion, albeit a very persistent illusion.
Yes.
So yeah, it just kind of left me knowing that I have something to achieve because I was allowed to come back, or I was thrown back. And those dark, shadowy beings, I guess, that I felt like I didn't feel like they were mean or they were evil. I felt like they were kind of working their day job. Like they're like bouncers or something.
Yeah.
I don't know.
One of my race car drivers that I cook for, who's now a TV announcer, after the book came out, you have to imagine I have this giant food tent, and then now all of a sudden there's a banner that says, "Life after death is real, Sandra Champlain's We Don't Die." I mean, like, it just doesn't fit, right? And so this TV announcer came in, he's like, "What is this?" And I ended up telling him I wrote the book, and I've been hiding out, not telling these stories. And he said, "I want to tell you something." He said, "Back in my 20s, he said, I got into a car accident, and he says, I actually had gone into a coma. I had flatlined on an operating table." He said, in just seconds, he said, all of a sudden my grandmother, my grandfather were there. He died, right? He flatlined. And he said it was a world so much more real, with colors that you can't even imagine. And one thing I forgot to say earlier when you asked me about near-death experiences is like there's this feeling of unconditional love. Like you just brought it up, yes. Saying unbelievable unconditional love, like that you can't even imagine. So he was telling me that, and then he's just like, I got to see my life, and I got the choice whether I wanted to go back down to earth or just go with Grandma and Grandpa. And either way would be fine, And he said, I saw my mom and my dad and my brother praying for me. And he said, I just felt like the right thing would be not to hurt them anymore and to go back. So he said, I ended up opening my eyes, and he said where he went made this life feel like just a dream, right? So just like what you said, it was so much even more real than this is. And then the best thing that he said he got out of it was, again, like I've been saying, he wasn't afraid of dying. So as a race car driver, he put his foot on the pedal further than anybody, and he won championships and NASCAR and big sporting events because he wasn't afraid. And like what a great thing. And so I hear, so I think it's natural to think a lot of people are skeptics and they're not going to believe. But I actually think that there's a lot of people hiding out, listening to your shows, listening to my shows, reading books, whatever, because men and women, that they might not come out publicly and say, I'm interested in this or I believe in this, but they do. And I've had a lot of people tell me their secret experiences, and they're mind-blowing, So I think you guys keep doing what you're doing, I'll keep doing what I'm doing, we keep sharing, and we'll have this be like a really cool conversation as opposed to like, sometimes people still think it's taboo, or the devil's work.
Ooh.
No.
Yeah, another thing that the spirits told me one time is that the Creator creates creators.
Yeah, that's pretty deep.
Yeah, right?
Another deep question I always ask guests is, do you think we might have evolved into creating the light? Maybe we created the afterlife as we evolved.
Yeah.
Because we grieved so hard.
It is so possible. Like Ian said, there's stuff that like we can't even verbalize. So I think it's so much bigger than our mortal brains can even get.
Yeah, evolutionists can believe in God that way.
That's true. That's true. Yeah.
So we were a little bit over time.
That's right.
But
you have some
questions
to fire at me?
Yeah, we're gonna do rapid fire here in a second. Okay. But my father-in-law is a.
But I went for it.
No, it'll be easy. My father-in-law is a pit crew member for a little bit for NASCAR, and my mom was a flag person for Road Atlanta.
Cool.
So you might have to tell me who that driver is after the show.
I go to Road Atlanta every year in October, so.
Yeah, you.
Come on down and get together.
Yeah, me and my mom now live. Road Atlanta is right in between us, so we can meet at Road Atlanta and at her events, and probably the events you go to.
I think it's October 3rd weekend. I think is when I'll be there. So.
All right, so we're going to do rapid fire here, and then we're going to
Okay.
let you go. Rapid fire, who is your favorite race car driver?
David Brabham,
Okay.
because he believes in all this stuff too. Yeah, I write about him in my book. Pretty cool.
And your favorite racetrack?
Oh my! I was expecting life after death questions. I think we'll go for Laguna Seca Raceway because I love Monterey, California, and I love the wine tasting and everything that area offers.
Sonoma, yeah, I like all that stuff. What is your favorite food to eat?
It's not rapid answers. Being a chef, I'm all over the place. I think right now, because it's summertime in New England, I'll be voting for lobster. I haven't had quite enough of that.
What's your favorite food to cook and see people be excited about?
I would have to say the gentlemen on the cruise love when I make Mexican food, and at the end of a race, margaritas, Mexican food, and things like that.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeehaw!
Gentlemen, thank you.
Last final rapid fire. What is next for Sandra Champlain?
It is creating the audio version of my book. It's getting my butt out there and doing some public speaking, not just hiding out on the radio, and continuing to interview people on my radio show, which is WeDon'tDieRadio.com.
Correct. Well, thanks for joining us. We really appreciate your time. That was a quick hour.
Thank you very much. That was quick.
Thank you both, gentlemen.
All right, Sandra.
Good night.
Have a good night.
Good night.
Bye-bye.